观众朋友们好，感谢大家来到本期的思想先驱报节目现场。在今天的思想先驱报节目中啊，我们继续要为大家介绍的仍然是近期我们其实聊的非常多的一个话题，就是芯片。何明先生，科技这个话题是您的老本行啊，所以首先请何明先生讲一下芯片到底是怎么回事儿。开玩笑啊，实际上呢，我们说芯片这个行业呀，它是叫做这个第4次工业革命的石油啊，讲的呢就是在未来啊，其实很多我们现在使用的，不管是 AI 技术也好啊，自动驾驶也好啊，等等等等，往往呢都要依靠于算力。那么芯片呢，作为算力的重要承载部分，现在也成为了国家竞争的要点。我们今天特别要为大家介绍到的呢，是来自彭博商业周刊的一篇文章。这一篇文章的题目啊，叫做《中国将华为打造成强大的芯片战争武器》啊，这个题目呢，一听就非常的有吸引力。那么到底讲述的是什么样的内容呢？其实说白了，就是说华为到底是一家什么样的公司？那我们知道啊，同属芯片行业，我们听说多很多公司啊，比如说美光，比如说英特尔啊，比如说台积电啊，比如中国这边有中芯啊，荷兰这边有 ASML 啊，阿斯麦啊，韩国有 SK 海力士，韩国有三星等等等等。这一些公司呢，其实在整个的芯片供应链中啊，是分别属于不同的阶段。那比如说台积电主要从事的是晶圆代工啊，那么比如说阿斯麦主要从事的是光刻机的生产。华为在整个这个网络中到底处于一个什么样的位置啊？从这一篇文章来说，其实很清晰，华为呀自己首先是芯片生产的重要客户，比如说它做智能手机，它需要芯片。同时，华为也是中国领先的芯片设计公司，它还进行芯片设计。但是现在华为越来越多的也成为了整个芯片产业链的技术供应者和资金支持者，变成了华为也成为了中国芯片产业链的股东以及我们叫做科研单位。这就让我们想到啊，跟华为直接对应的或许是2家公司，在美国这一边是英特尔，在韩国这一边是三星。这2家公司的特征是什么呢？我们叫做 IDM， 叫做垂直整合。他们呢，在整个芯片行业的各个供应链的前端、后端都有部署，形成了一个自我能够较为完善的一个网络。而世界上其他的任何一个公司，往往呢是聚焦于芯片产业的某一个环节。从目前的情况来看，国家、中国政府，还有具体而言啊，深圳市政府所支持的，正是把华为变成一家这样的公司。而彭博新闻社的这一篇文章啊，正是揭示了整个由华为和深圳市政府投资基金所支持的网络的各个部分环节，包括专门进行光学研究的组织，专门进行芯片设备开发的组织，专门进行化学品生产的组织等等等等。其实彭博新闻社关注华为已经不是第一次了，在今年夏天的时候，彭博呢就首次揭露了当时呢中国是投资了300亿美元帮助华为建立芯片制造设施这样的消息。这个非常讽刺的就是其实有关于华为和中国政府之间的关系，那么媒体进行各种各样的报道呢，始终得到的都是间接的证据，比如说华为在中国的5G 部署中，在一带一路中起到了怎样的作用，反而是美国对于华为的出口管制，真的是把中国政府和华为这一家企业的关系，是以之前从来没有见过的方式整合到了一起。那么彭博社的文章引述熟悉华为内部的消息的人士透露，现在政府高层直接下达命令，让华为成为中国自给自足芯片产业的实际负责人和试验田和领头羊，以华为为事业，以华为为先导，以华为为总负责。彭博社原文说，这是北京政府高层直接下达的命令。所以有的时候我们说这个你说这个因果关系到底怎么说美国对于华为的一轮出口管制，反而是让美国之前对于华为的怀疑，你到底是不是中国政府在背后支持的这件事儿，还真的是坐实了。尽管目前呢，华为对于他们和深圳市政府的关系和国家基金的关系仍然呢是表现得比较低调，但是从各种各样的蛛丝马迹，我们似乎看到，在中国所谓突破卡脖子或者叫做实现反封锁这一个环节，华为呢已经是站到了前线上。 那么我们说华为这一家公司啊，其实在80年代最开始的时候啊，只是在通信设备行业崭露头角，后来啊才进军到了其他领域，比如说手机啊等等等等。而华为的这个创始人任正非先生啊，有一个特点，就是灾难没有来临的时候，他就已经说大事不好，就是这样的一个特点。据彭博社的文章介绍啊，华为在自己的深圳主校园啊，一直养了黑天鹅。为什么要养黑天鹅呢？就是在习近平提出了黑天鹅之前，华为已经看到了黑天鹅，警惕大家不要自满，危机随时可能爆发。
也许习近平的黑天鹅就是因为华为养的，
对，也许就是华为放了一只黑天鹅到了中南海啊。但这样的一个消息，还是让我觉得蛮惊讶的，还真的是在校区里面，人家是养了真的黑天鹅啊。不知道灰犀牛能不能够在深圳这样的一个气候下成长啊？那么这个在10几年前，当时华为还没有在全世界引起这么大的封锁，公司的业务还是蒸蒸日上。当时任正非就告诉工程师说：“我们呀，必须要投资半导体和芯片。说我们投资半导体和芯片，这是避免我们未来面临不可避免的致命威胁的唯一途径。我们的半导体和芯片是有可能让别人卡住我们脖子的。”卡脖子这个词也是从任正非这儿来的。他说我们不能因为那一个环节就让别人把华为生生的掐死掉。当时是10几年前，可能世界上不知道华为，我们的印象中的华为还是在中国生产一些通信设备的那个华为，但是实际上当时任正非就已经看到了芯片对于华为成长的关键性。当时华为实际上就已经开始了在芯片方面的投资和科研。2019年的时候呢，美国把华为列入了黑名单。从此之后，任正非的这个黑天鹅的预言就真的兑现了，华为也就真的开始了一场生存之战。那平时啊，我们说华为有狼性文化啊，狼性文化，这个狼性文化到什么程度呢？根据来自彭博社这一篇文章的介绍啊，华为的高级的研发科学家总共是1万多人，1万多人，当时华为安排他们24小时轮岗值班。从设计电路板，从开发新软件，从进行芯片技术的突围，24小时不间断的工作。在美国没有美国技术的情况下，必须要保证能够继续运行华为的业务。据彭博社的文章介绍啊，这些员工好几天都不离开深圳的这个园区，每天就是以方便面为生。然后呢，睡就睡在自己公司的椅子上。现在大家去华为的这一些这个深圳总部的校园，可能还能看到这样的景象，就是半夜3点的时候，这个研发大楼仍然是每一盏灯都亮着那么经常呢，在他们的办公室外，我们可以看到我们叫做行军便床就是平时你这个斜在那儿就可以睡一睡就像和平先生在我们办公室里搭的这个地铺一样，这样的一些地方，正是这样的一种全力以赴的努力所谓的华为的这样的狼性文化，让公司在最危急的时候可以继续运营。而在这样的时候，中国政府也发现了，就是被美国卡脖子实在是非常难过，于是呢，中国政府也开始加大了对于华为的支持力度，导致现在中国政府和华为真的是出现了国家战略和企业之间的相互依存这样的一个关系何明先生，那对于彭博社这篇文章所透露的这样的情况，我想请你做简要的点评是不是符合你所了解到的华为的特点？
我对芯片了解的很少，你一开始就把我讽刺了一通。其实我对华为了解的也非常少你少的可能比一般网友了解的还要少的程度。但是我有几个很粗糙的思考。第一点就是20世纪人类世界上做的最多的工作就是分裂，以所谓的民族自觉，以这个解放的很多的名义，很多国家分裂了。但是到了21世纪，我去这些小国走的时候，我就感慨万端，就觉得一个小国你怎么生存呢？在全球的竞争环境之下，全球的市场的情况之下，后来大家也慢慢知道，就是只有大国才能完成很多问题的基本解决。我前面你刚才讲了彭博这篇文章里面一个关键的点，就是说一个生态的一个问题。像美国这样强大的国家，它要完成一个芯片的这么一个生态链，它都有很多国家的组成。而中国是试图由一家公司来完成，它有这种行径壮志，你不觉得令人震惊吗？所以你觉得像它那个24小时这样的 一个企业运作的方式跟作战的时候几乎是一样的。我对华为的了解的粗糙到什么程度？就是当他们的孟晚舟被抓的时候，我连孟晚舟是谁都不知道，华为的情况不了解，我只是很亢奋，哇，抓了一个高管，不错啊，把他的这个跟这些肮脏的这种权贵交际的事情出来。我记得当时我在佛罗里达，后来很快就发现我是太无知了，然后我才发现美国是用全国之力举国之力，甚至动员了他所有能动员的外交力量、司法力量，在全面打击华为。我当时的判断还是比较简单，我觉得我很快就发现就是因为美国没有5G，西方没有5G，所以要来阻挡这个华为。然后就讲华为是军工企业，华为是中共什么这个军方等等等等。我追证了很久以后，因为西方的媒体有时候也是为政治服务，但是整体来讲，我觉得专业素质还是比华为还是高太多太多。所以我在这种新闻的泡沫后面去真正找泥塑文章的时候，彭博通讯社尤其华尔街日报有好几篇比较深度的报道。在这些深度报道里面，我就越来越发现一个底，就是说伊朗的事情真的是那么严重吗？华为真的是偷了西方的这个技术吗？我就发现那些指控譬如说技术的事情是很多大公司之间经常发生的事情我们后来都知道了，孟晚舟就被释放的时候，我又跟我们的几位华裔的这个历史产生很大的观点上的冲突，他们就认为这个就是要为了惩治华为留下一个把柄。我当时就认为这已经是这个阶段性的解套了，不可能再延续下去了。但是华为后来的发展的这个力量还是远远超过我的想象。我可以说整个的过程都超过我的想象，超过我的想象，以至于我现在没办法判断华为到底有多少能力。也有人跟我说，华为后面是一个巨大的一个黑洞，或者是一个很严重的一个地方，我都没有这个判断力我没有这个判断力，我只有靠这个彭博通讯社这样的一等稿件所呈现的情况来看。我觉得它几乎就是一个国家一样的，甚至一个国家的一个企业生产能力都达不到，或者是研发能力都达不到华为这样一个水平。
那么刚才何明先生提到的一点，就是感觉像华为像一个国家一样，它正在全供应链的布局
是。
那么这里今天我们就把这个细节给大家讲得更详细一些。华为到底是在哪个环节上现在力量还不足，还需要突破？在哪一个环节上它已经具有了某一种先进能力？那我们说整个芯片的供应链分为几个环节包括芯片的设计，包括呢这个晶圆的代工包括光刻机像照相机一样，就是把这个电路之间的联系要刻在这个晶片上。然后呢，还有叫做芯片制造芯片制造之后，还有我们就是说包装封装检验等等等等，是一个非常复杂的流程。实际上呢，根据我们的了解华为在芯片设计这个环节上已经走在了世界先烈，而且不是现在，在几年前就已经有了。有一位专家向我介绍华为旗下这个海思也正好是当时被美国制裁的这个焦点那么实际上在几年之前就已经能够设计出3纳米和5纳米的芯片，甚至其中还有一些特色的功能，等一下我们再说。所以在芯片设计上呢，实际上并不是华为被卡脖子的焦点。在晶圆代工这里的确离台积电这样的世界领先的水平差距还非常的大。但是中国有另外一家公司叫做中芯国际，中芯国际呢基本上也是可以满足华为的需求。比如之前我们看到 Mate60 这款手机上那么其中呢是中芯和华为合作的影子非常的明显。真正对于华为而言，一个非常重要的环节是芯片制造公司，我们叫做 tooling 这一个环节。而根据来自彭博社的介绍，实际上华为已经投资了供应链上10几家跟芯片制造相关的企业，最重要的一家是2021年才建立的，这一家公司的名字叫做 C Carrier 名字我们都没有听说到。那么这一家叫做 C Carrier 的公司呢，它基本成为了华为内部的一个研究机构，华为需要什么我们就生产什么。 最有趣的是，这一家公司是2021年建设成的，但是它的实验室的名字是什么呢？叫做2012实验室。这个名字是任正非亲笔写的。2012来自于哪里呢？这是著名的导演罗兰·艾莫里奇执导的一部电影啊，一部灾难片，讲述的是这个地球范围内出现了非常严重的自然灾害，然后呢，这个中国在没有无人能及的情况下，建造了一个巨大的方舟最后从这个灾难中给人类带来了第2次生机。所以我们说这个一般来讲这个末日论都是骗子，但是任正非真的是一个末日论的信徒老是把情况往最坏的情况上想本来华为好好的，他非要把黑天鹅养在深圳园区本来人家是2021年华为实现突破封锁的第1年，他非要把内部关键实验室的名字叫做2012实验室。而这个 Sea Carrier 这样一个实验室又非常的低调它呢是在中科院下属的一个工业园区里面有一个办事处，在深圳的一个郊区的一个小型的园区的6层楼的顶层有一个这样的工厂。那么彭博社的记者呢还真的是去探访了这个地方，这是一点。另外，中国卡脖子的关键的环节是什么呢？就是光机，就是我们叫做光刻机那么之前阿斯麦在这个领域的地位我们也讲过，有关于光刻机，稍后我们在另外一个环节再为大家详细介绍阿斯麦是怎样走到今天的。还有另外一家企业，现在也是华为投资的要点，叫做 Z-Top， 是一家光机制造商那么光机这种技术实际上是现在生产微芯片的核心，因为我们知道芯片本身就是一层又一层的晶体管绑定在硅片上制成的，其中一个关键就是叫光刻工艺，就是把光就相当于是把图案的蓝图像照相机一样投射到这个晶片上。而这家叫做 Z-Top 的光机制造机的股东是谁呢？叫长春光学精密仪器与物理研究所，隶属于中科院下属的一家机构，这呢是中国最好的光学技术研究机构。这让我想到之前李强总理在习近平外访的时候去了东北，说东北要变成是新兴产业的开发地带。当时很多的观众朋友们都不以为然认为东北这地方是做不了企业的。但实际上大家可能不知道的就是说，东北作为叫共和国的长子所谓实际上呢，它的工业基础是相当好的，有一些我们叫做重物理重工的这些研究所，实际上在东北是有相当好的部署的，比如我们所熟悉的哈军工哈工大包括吉林大学等等等等，理工科还是相当强硬的。所以不知道这个长春的光学精密机械和物理研究所是不是能够以它所在的这样的一个我们叫做研究机构和这样的一个研究氛围，带动整个我们叫做光学仪器的发展这一点何明先生怎么看？
你的问题是什么？
就是有关于华为卡脖子的地方到底是在哪里？
我觉得你都讲出来了
对，那我们就继续往下说
对呀，你都已经讲出来了。
对，那我们说这个光刻机我们之后再为大家详细的介绍到底是什么。但是我们整个来说如果我们说你做一个芯片就像搭一栋房子一样这个晶圆就像是搭房子所需要的积木，晶圆加工全世界最好的是哪里？是台积电，对吧？而这个光刻技术呢，相当于是图纸，你需要把芯片制作的线路和功能区给印出来，像照相机一样。那么这样的话呢，才可以把电路图和其他的电子元件呢，能够排列以这样一个比较我们叫做比较直观的方式印在晶圆上，这就是整个芯片产业的关键另外华为现在还在进行一方面的布局，就是人才的布局。根据来自彭博社的调查报道自从华为列入了黑名单之后，就开始大幅的招募国际具有先进芯片生产经验的员工，比如阿斯麦的前员工被华为重金拉到华为来帮助从事芯片制造机器的生产。普遍呢，大家也认为，以华为现在的实力，如果要开发出 EUV， 这是阿斯麦最先进的设备技术，可能还需要相当长的时间。毕竟，连阿斯麦自己开发出 EUV 也是进行了几十年的时间，从90年代开始研究到2020年左右才投入生产，30几年。但是华为要进行这个弯道赶超，可能不需要20-30年，但是有那么5年8年，恐怕也是走不开的。 之前呢，大家也特别注意到华为和中兴之间的这一种合作关系。那么根据来自彭博社的这一篇文章介绍啊，这样的一种企业与企业之间的密切合作，正是在中国主导整个芯片产业大战略这样的一个推动下所进行的。因此我们知道，中国不必在半导体的每个供应链都实现完全的自给自足。首先，中国自己国内的企业可以完成一部分代工任务。在美国可以切断供应有这么4、5个关键的环节上，中国必须要出国内的替代品和制成品。刚才我们提到的光刻、晶圆生产，包括现在比较前沿的叫做电子设计自动化EDA 等等等等，这一些就成为了华为布局的关键。特别有意思的是何文先生可能还记得，在这个美国的商务部长雷蒙多访华的时候，华为呢是突然非常低调的推出了 Mate60 手机。当时我们在节目中还讨论呢，这样的一款我们说是这个华为真正扬眉吐气的产品宣布美国管制失败的产品，华为居然连个产品发布会也没有，整个华为内部好像是非常的低调。那我们当时猜测，是不是华为不想引起太多的喧嚣注意怕激起美国对于它另外一轮的制裁等等等等。但是根据来自彭博社这一篇文章实际背后可能还有另外一个原因，就是华为当时是被中国政府下了紧急通知，就在雷蒙多访华期间就推出这一款产品，导致华为连公关宣传广告包装所有这一些都没有时间做好。而彭博社的文章分析，这样的一个我们叫做意识或者是细节，正体现了华为现在在中国政府眼中的分量和地位。那我想请教一下何明先生你认为彭博社引述消息人士透露的这个消息是真是假，是不是可信？
是真是假我没办法判断，但是可信度很高，或者是符合逻辑的一个背景是，当上孟晚舟女士在加拿大被捕之后，中国政府有很多动作这些动作在我看起来是愚蠢的，会对长期的增加关系和中国的国际形象受到伤害，也增加了处理孟晚舟事件的难度。我们知道任正非先生他的态度是公开出来的态度，我们都是觉得很可敬的，因为他在那种情况之下，他仍然认为他相信加拿大的法治。当时我觉得中国有这样的企业家，在自己的家人忙难的时候还有如此的立场。但是当时的中国的社会把这个事情炒作成为一个民粹主义的一个题材，我认为这个是对西方的法治不太了解。你说孟晚舟这个事情有没有政治操作？毫无疑问这是个政治案件，加拿大的司法部不够勇敢，所以才造成把这个事情扔到法院去，这些事情都是可以讨论的。但是即算是这样，加拿大的司法过程是很专业的，而且是很独立的，就是说虽然它可以政治影响它，那么在这个时候中国政府有很多这种行为。那有一位很了解华为的人，就是曾经跟我们讲过，他说实际上华为是比较难办的，因为有些事情根本就不是他们想做的事情，但是各方面都是想借此机会来表现自己，反而使这个问题呢在华为看起来增加了难度。其实他们的判断跟我的判断是差不多的，所以他们在觉得哇，你怎么做出这样的判断？所以从这个例子来证明，就是说华为有华为自己的逻辑，任正非有任正非自己的这个立场，或者是他做事的方式，但是中国政府或者是中国有些人就想利用华为做文章所以你说华为能怎么办？如果中国政府给他这么一个要求，他也敢不做吗？就像美国这样一个企业，如果政府真的希望你做一下配合，除非是对你公司整个利益有很大的伤害，有时候你也是配合政府的。那在中国政府这种生态之下，也就变成一个没有选择的一个办法。但是我觉得是很笨的。很笨的。
咱们下面一个环节就谈笨的问题。但咱们现在稍事休息。这个环节呢，主要为大家介绍的是来自彭博社的这一篇文章，讲述了华为现在到底要在哪些环节上进行突围，以及美国的封锁所导致的悖论，就是进一步拉紧了中国政府和华为之间的关系。刚才何斌先生提到了一个词叫做笨我们下面就来讲一讲为什么美国的出口管制在华为这里没有奏效。这种出口管制制度为什么从根源上来讲就不是用来抵挡新技术传导到另外一个国家的合适手段？我们稍后再见。
I do want to start a little bit with the context, because this is the first time we've seen a Commerce Secretary here at the Reagan National Defense Forum, one of the biggest defense conferences of the year. And I think the fact that you are here really speaks to the growing intersection of industrial, economic, and tech policy where national security is concerned. So I want to start right there. Why should commerce be taking on this expanded role in matters of national security?
Yes, well, good morning. Good morning. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Look, I think everybody here knows the fact that our national defense is more than guns, missiles, tanks, and drones. It's technology, it's innovation, it's working with our allies. Quite frankly, our national security rests upon our economic security. You cannot be a strong nation that defends itself unless you have the most competitive economy in the world and an innovation engine that leads the world. And by the way, it's not just at home, it's abroad. You know, our allies around the world want us to show up, not just to send them fighter jets, but to help create jobs. And whether that's in the Indo-Pacific or South America, you know, our adversaries, most particularly China, they're showing up every day with money and infrastructure and jobs. And if we want to win, we have to show up too. In fact, I was delighted to go to Panama with General Richardson a few months ago. I'll be going to the Philippines with Commander Aguilino next year. Like, this is game on. Game on. Economic prosperity and opportunity matters every bit as much as pure military might to protect our national security and sustain our place in the world.
Is it a reflection to have you on stage here and to be opening with statements like this? Is it a reflection of how much the world has changed, or is it a reflection of the fact that U.S. policy should have been more aggressive in terms of that intersection long ago?
So that's a great question. Look, I think it's always been the case that national security rests on economic security. That being said, technology is more important than ever to our national security. And the Commerce Department sits in the center of the administration's technology and innovation policy. So as our military apparatus depends more and more on technology, whether that is artificial intelligence, spectrum strategy, supercomputing, cybersecurity, semiconductors, technology matters more to our national security. And the Commerce Department, you know, we are running the administration's AI policy. We are, of course, involved. We run export controls, like denying China and our adversaries our most sophisticated technology. We lead on the administration's spectrum policy. So I think as technology is more intertwined with national defense, offensively, you know, investing in semiconductor capacity, defensively denying China technology, like Commerce Department's in the red hot center of that, and that's more important than it's ever been because technology is more important than it's ever been.
We're going to dig into every one of those topics here. First, one more question before we do, and that is, how are you institutionalizing this national security role? How do you ensure that these are policies that have a lasting impact, or at least set the stage or set the precedent for this type of discussion, type of debate, type of approach in the future through different administrations, regardless of political parties?
Yeah, so I would say this is definitely not a flash in the pan. I may be the first Commerce Secretary here. I will certainly not be the last. You know, export controls, we have taken a very aggressive, new, innovative approach to how we're doing export controls. You know, in October of last year, BIS, run by Undersecretary Estevez, who's here with me, did a historic rule, first time ever, that we denied an entire country, China, access to a suite of semiconductors and equipment. We're going to continue to go in that direction. So we're building a team. You know, I have 100 people working for me now that didn't work in the Commerce Department, just focused on semiconductors. We're adding to our technical capacity at BIS for artificial intelligence. So I think we're building a more muscular commerce department to take on these challenges. And I think you will see that that's here to stay. I will say, for members of Congress who are here, I'll just say this. BIS has the same budget today as it did a decade ago. We have twice as many licensing requests. I get called from members of Congress, Democrat and Republican, constantly. Why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you controlling more with artificial intelligence? Why aren't you controlling more with semiconductors? I agree with you. I have a $200 million budget. That's like the cost of a few fighter jets. Come on. If we're serious, let's go. Fund this operation like it needs to be funded so we can do what we need to do to protect America.
You mentioned export controls. You rolled out new updated 10.7 rules, export controls on chips just recently. Why was that necessary?
We can't let China get these chips. Period. Period. Listen, here's the amazing thing. I know there's a lot of members of the private sector here, a lot of entrepreneurs here. America leads the world in artificial intelligence. Period. Full stop. America leads the world in advanced semiconductor design. Period. Full stop. That's because of our private sector. That's because we have great innovators. It's because of our public sector, too, investing in that. We're a couple years ahead of China. No way are we going to let them catch up. We cannot let them catch up. So we're going to deny them our most cutting-edge technology. And I know there are CEOs of chip companies. Oh, thank you. I know there are CEOs of chip companies in this audience who were a little cranky with me when I did that because you're losing revenue. Such is life. Protecting our national security matters more than short-term revenue. And so that's what we're going to do. I'll tell you, this stuff, when I say this stuff, I mean supercomputing, AI technology, AI chips, in the wrong hands is as deadly as any weapon that we could provide. And so we have to be serious if we're going to meet that threat. And serious about enforcement. The other thing we need resources for at the Commerce Department is enforcement. Every day, China wakes up trying to figure out how to do an end run around our export controls. Every minute of every day, which means every minute of every day, we have to wake up tightening those controls and being more serious about enforcement with our allies, with the Dutch, with the Japanese, with the Europeans. That's another thing we're doing. We have to have a multilateral approach, similar to COCOM in the depths of the Cold War. We need a multilateral approach to export controls to really, meet the threat that China poses.
There has been, you touched on it a little bit, but there has been criticism that export controls have gone too far. There's also been the criticism that they haven't gone far enough. So I guess what goes into the decision-making process around that, and is it still up for review? Are you still looking at changing it or adjusting it as we go here in real time?
It's really hard. Alan and I talk about this all the time. It's a constant balance. If you go too far in export controls, you deny U.S. companies revenue, which they need to continue to innovate. And if we do it without our allies, that's doubly problematic. What good is it to deny U.S. companies revenue if China gets the technology anyway from the Germans, the Dutch, the Japanese, or the Koreans? Having said that, if you don't go far enough, China gets our technology and they could do nuclear simulation or whatever they want. A modern fighting force is more technologically enabled than ever. That's why commerce matters so much. And so these discussions of where to draw the line, I'm not going to lie, I don't know if we're perfect. I don't know if you can be perfect. So what I tell my team is we need to have a constant dialogue with industry so we know as much as they know about the technology, a constant dialogue with our friends in the Pentagon. And I have a huge shout out to Secretary Austin. He's been an amazing partner to me. And we just have to have a fidelity and discipline to our process so that we're constantly challenging ourselves. Are we doing enough? Are we not doing too much? And also, one of the things I'm doing at Commerce is really building up our technical capacity. So like I said, we know as much as anyone else about the technology.
I mean, China's chip makers have been stockpiling equipment in preparation of this. Look no further than Huawei's new smartphone that was released a couple of months ago to know
When
that
I was
there's-
in China.
Yes. Oh, look at that.
Thank you very much.
To know that they're moving quickly on this, how quickly can you counter them when you are having to take a thoughtful approach? You are speaking to industry. You do have a team that is on a $200 million budget, and yes, growing, but there's only so fast you can go.
Yeah. So I would say this. The nature of the threat is changing, and we need to therefore change our strategy. Historically, BIS uses what everyone here knows, the entity list. Huawei, for example, is a Chinese national champion. They're on the entity list. SMIC, like we know for a fact, these Chinese companies aid the Chinese military. So they're on the list. We can't sell things to them. But that gets us into like a whack-a-mole, right? So Huawei spins out another company. It's really a constant whack-a-mole. So what we're trying to move towards, which is what we did with October 7th, is countrywide controls. We have to get smarter about what are the technologies, which are just where we are ahead of China. They're capable of doing very bad things, and we're going to deny the entire country this class of equipment. So that's one example of how we're innovating on our approach to meet the threat. Because as you say, if you're just doing this whack-a-mole approach, we find out of one company that's a problem, we put them on the list. Literally a week from now, there'll be another company. You know, China will create another subsidiary. So I think we're getting more serious about countrywide controls, and I can't say it enough, we have to get even more serious about working with our allies. It's not okay if we deny China something and the Japanese and the Germans are selling them component parts to make EUV tools. Not okay. So we've got to get more serious about it so that it's harder. There's nothing perfect, right? The Chinese are going to do everything they can to find loopholes, but we have to get faster, more agile, and think differently about our strategies.
I have one more question on this before we start to move on here, and that is U.S. industry or semi-industry on board? And I ask that, I'm not trying to call out this company specifically, it's just that they were in the news this week. They are the poster child of AI, but NVIDIA, for example, developing a new export compliant chip for China, the H20. It's expected to roll out early next year. It meets the export control requirements, but when you see the adaptability of that dynamic in a global marketplace for American companies, does it mean that the conversation with industry has to change or evolve more than where it currently is now?
Yes, and that's a great point. So, and I want to say this to everybody in industry who is here. Is industry on board? I mean, yes, but they're in the business of making money. Every time I take an action, it denies them revenue. My own view is that industry, newsflash, democracy is good for your businesses. Rule of law here and around the world is good for your businesses. So it might make for a tough quarterly shareholder call, but in the long run, it's worth you working with us to defend our country's national security. If you're not selling into China a decade from now, it's not because of our export controls. It's because China's designing you out because they want to decouple, not because of what I do. So we have to be eyes wide open about the threat from China and work together so your businesses are strong and lead the world, but also so our national security is protected. I would say industry's been, cooperative, helpful. We have a good relationship, very much so. But of course, there's a bit of a natural tension in the work that we do in the moment. On export controls, I do want to say this. We do, to answer your question, I think it's a really smart question, we need to move beyond the traditional way we're engaging with industry in the following respect. Historically, the Commerce Department draws a cut line, like we did with NVIDIA. We drew a particular cut line. Not surprisingly, within a few months, NVIDIA released a new chip just below that cut line. Fine. That's what industry does. That's what we've taught them to do. That's the way export controls work. That's not productive. So we need to, and Alan and I are developing this, a new way to have a continuous dialogue with industry where our engineers can go toe-to-toe with their engineers, and we go to them and say, our intent is to deny China technologies that can do X, Y, Z. So I'm telling you, if you redesign a chip around a particular cut line that enables them to do AI, I'm going to control it the very next day. So we have to get to a place with industry where we say our national security goal is to have no AI special sauce in your chip, for example, and just don't do it. And so but it's a more nuanced discussion, because otherwise we just say, draw the line, the engineer around the line, we draw the line, the engineer around the line. We have to have a more continuous back and forth with industry where we make our intentions clear. By the way, the burden's on us. This is our intention. This is the effect we need to have, almost like the commander's intent. And then industry needs to comply.
Commerce is playing, this brings us squarely into the conversation of artificial intelligence overall. Commerce is playing a key role in the president's first-of-its-kind executive order on AI. You and I spoke the day it was unveiled. How quickly does that roll out? How meaningful is it to providing guardrails for capability, for AI capability, despite the conversation we're having between pacing threats and great power competitions where we know this technology is going to matter not only today, but in the future more meaningfully?
So the Commerce Department is, as you say, in the center of the president's strategy for AI. We have two roles. One is what we've been talking about, BIS, denying China our AI. But I think the more important role we have actually is proactive, investing with industry through the CHIPS Act, working with industry to help them run faster so we can out-innovate China. About a month ago, I stood up in the Commerce Department an AI Safety Institute, and that's intended to work with industry and with Congress and with policymakers to figure out what are the guardrails. I will say there's a view in Silicon Valley, this move fast and break things, effective acceleration. We can't embrace that with AI. It's too dangerous. You can't break things when you're talking about AI. So we have to find a balance. We have to find a balance of, as you say, guardrails, making sure these models don't get into the hands of non-state actors and bad guys, making sure the models do what we think they're going to do. That's a huge thing. Not even the developers know what the model will do. So it has to be safe, but we have to be very careful because we can't overreach, otherwise we'll stifle innovation. And America's in the lead because we've out-innovated the world. Europe is way behind us. China is still behind us. So anyway, it's, once again, it's delicate and it is complicated. I will say this. When I look in the mirror, I am constantly asking myself, how can I run a more innovative Commerce Department in the age of AI? I think everyone in government needs to do that. Government across the board is way too slow to know how to procure software, how to procure AI, how to use AI for good in what we do. And still a little bit, I think we have a zero-sum game of what are we going to do? Enable industry or enable innovation in industry or protect our national security. And that's an old-fashioned way of thinking, and we can't have that zero-sum game. We got to do both. We got to enable industry so we out-innovate and protect our national security.
So what does that actually look like? Because China might be behind us. They're not subjecting themselves to the same ethics, same guardrails, or even same approach to data.
We don't want to be lowest common denominator. We're a country that values privacy, that values rights, that values human rights. None of that's changing. So we can do both. That's what makes America great. We can do both, and we will do both. We need to make investments in research and development. We need to make investments in job training and technical capacity. We need to work with industry to enable them to innovate and also have guardrails so that we don't, like I said, either do bad things ourselves. We have to protect our technology. I mean, the state-sponsored espionage to get access to our technology is so real. So it's, but we can do it. I have no doubt that we can do it. But it has to be a new model to meet the threat that China poses. We have to have a new model of collaboration between commerce and the Pentagon, between the government and industry, between universities and the defense industrial base. I mean, it has to be a more modern model if we're going to meet the challenges as required.
Which brings us to CHIPS Act, big sweeping package. I think we have quite a number of folks, if I had to guess in this room, who are very curious to know when funding starts to go out.
Any day now. I have a whole team back home working as we speak. I checked in with them all early this morning. Look, I'll say this in all seriousness. Really soon, I'd love to make an announcement before the end of the year, and then continued stream of announcements in the first half of next year. It's not to be defensive, but Commerce, at the time the bill was passed, wasn't built to do this job. We've hired 110 people, some of the best investors in America, the best credit market analysts in America, the best industry analysts, the best engineers. So we've built it from whole cloth. I am very proud of the work we're doing in terms of how high quality it is, protecting taxpayers' money. And so I think you'll start, like I already said, the timeline. I want to say this, especially to members of the audience who may be applying for CHIPS money. I'm going to be in the business of dishing out disappointment because there's just not enough money. We only have $39 billion for these company incentives, and I have a national security mission that I must meet. Yes, we want to create jobs in America. Yes, we need manufacturing in America. Fundamentally, this is a national security initiative. The United States of America really makes no leading-edge chips on our shores today. You mentioned NVIDIA. All of their chips are made in Taiwan. Every one of them. I don't need to tell anyone in this audience the risks related to Taiwan or China. So at the end of the day, I'm going to do my very best to stretch this capital, be creative, and get everyone a good number. But at the end of the day, for me to sleep, put my head on the pillow at night, I've got to meet the national security mission. And that means making sure we make enough leading-edge chips, have enough advanced packaging, enough current mature chips for the defense industrial base in the United States of America. It's a national security mission that we need to achieve with this money.
Have you gamed out those risks where Taiwan is concerned? Because to your point, NVIDIA or Apple or any other countless number of companies and thus economies would be impacted if you did see China make some sort of move on Taiwan, particularly in the near term. And if we thought we saw supply chain spurred inflation coming out of the pandemic, we ain't seen nothing yet in terms of the economic turmoil a situation like that would entail. So how quickly can you stand up that domestic manufacturing, especially when fabs are complicated and they can take years to put together?
Once again, you hit the nail on the head. We can't move fast enough. Look, I don't know if and when China will make a move on Taiwan, and in many ways I can't control that. Our Defense Department's doing an amazing job with deterrence. What I can control is how fast we run in America. So I have to assume the worst and go as fast as we can. And that's why we're going to start getting this money out the door early next year, and we're working. I will say, I want to thank all the chips companies who are here who've applied. They've all been unbelievable partners. It's not like they apply and we give them an answer. It's a constant back and forth, back and forth. You know, what are their plans? They're amending their plans to meet our national security needs. That's why I mentioned advanced packaging, for example. So I feel great about it, and that's the attitude we have to say, which is like, we need this for America's national security. What's the fastest, most capital-efficient way to accomplish this? And let's get it done.
I've got 2 more questions for you here.
Brief.
So we're going to try and bang through this because I know the clock's ticking down. The first is we're talking a lot about chips. Are there other U.S. origin products or types of technologies that you are looking at in a similar fashion right now?
Absolutely. In biotechnology, AI models, AI products, cloud computing, supercomputing. So short answer is yes. You know, once again, as everything gets so much more technologically enabled and everything that flows from artificial intelligence, that's why I said I'll maybe the first here, I'm not the last, because technology and our ability to control our technology, I think BIS, if it's not already, should be soon the most exciting place to work in the federal government, because it's this. How do we advance AI and control AI and everything that flows from it effectively to win? And that's the work that we're doing.
You met with your Chinese counterparts in China a couple of months ago. You were in the room for Presidents Biden and Xi meeting at APEC. You met with your own counterparts, Chinese counterparts at APEC. How would you, even as we have this conversation on stage, how would you characterize the relationship currently between the 2 countries as we've seen communication, relations thaw and increase?
I would say communication is a good thing, because here's what I know. If you don't have communication, you'll move more rapidly to escalation and tension and miscalculation. But don't confuse communication with weakness or softness. There's a lot of commerce to be done with China. It won't affect our national security. It'll create jobs in America, and we should do that. And by the way, it should be reciprocal. If they want access to our markets, they have to give us access to their markets. You know, Union Pay, Alipay, their payments happen in America. Let's go. MasterCard, Visa, et cetera, ought to be allowed in China. So on a fair, you know, and that's just one example because I only have a second, but on a level playing field, we will compete and we will trade, and that is good. But on matters of national security, we got to be eyes wide open about the threat. This is the biggest threat we've ever had. And we need to meet the moment. And so I think that we just, you could communicate, you should communicate. You have to work together on things like fentanyl and climate wherever we can. We have no interest in tension, no interest in escalation. The world needs us to manage our relationship with China responsibly to avoid escalation. We've got to do all that, but make no mistake about it. China's not our friend, and we need to be eyes wide open about the extent of that threat.
Is there anything else you want to add before we finish this conversation?
The only thing I would say, apart from the fact that I'm really pleased to be here, is a challenge to all of us to think differently. You know, technology is changing at a rate that we've never seen. And that means we need to change. We need to change the way we think about spectrum strategy. It can't be a zero-sum game. We need to make spectrum available so we can out-innovate the world and make sure the DoD has what it needs. We already talked about AI. We need to change the way we procure technology. We need to change, like when we're doing our hiring internally, how do we get the engineers and technical geniuses that we need to do the job? How do we attract and recruit young people to the government, you know, to do this work that we need? And so for all of us, I mean, that's the challenge, it's the excitement. Like, I am ready to win, and I'm ready to do that with all of you, but it's time to open our aperture and challenge the way we've done business in every way if we're going to meet the threat China poses and if we're going to do what needs to be done with this technology.